So it was a year ago that Joko Widodo became the first president of Indonesia to be elected from outside the military and political elite. And there was real hope for a shake-up of politics and the economy, an end to corruption and a reduction in inequality. What followed, though, were political mistakes, diplomatic disputes and the worst economic slowdown in 6 years. Now, Joko aimed high. He wanted 7% growth by 2017. He got 4.7% earlier this year, which is the slowest since 2009. Also, poverty rates have risen to 11.25% this past March, up only slightly, but in number terms, we are talking about more than 28 million people living below the poverty line. And the currency, like many other commodity exporting nations, has fallen drastically. It is down 12% since Joko took office. So now he's talking about an infrastructure kickstart. Airports, a new dam, ports and roads, and in a small success, the Chinese have agreed to contribute $5 billion towards a rail project. But the short story here is that President Joko Widodo has had a rotten first year in office, and if he wants to turn it and his popularity around, then he needs to concentrate on the economy. Let's begin with this look back at the first 365 days with Step Vassen in Jakarta.
It's been a rocky year for President Joko Widodo. 1 year into his presidency, nearly half of all Indonesians say they're not happy with his performance. Dahlia, who as many Indonesians has only one name, was one of his strongest supporters. When he was governor of Jakarta, Joko Widodo managed to move her and thousands of others out of their slum dwellings into proper apartments. Some were helped to start their own businesses. But a year on, and Dahlia is struggling.
The economy is getting worse and our situation is getting more and more difficult. Prices are going up and I think the president's performance is not good yet. He needs to work and try harder.
After Widodo took office, he was faced with a sluggish economy. The growth rate was at a 6-year low. While the government blamed global pressures, analysts pointed to an inexperienced president with a lack of political power.
Untuk mencapai hasil yang baik,
President Jokowi has to be braver to make political decisions, especially when it comes to choosing a good team. I think the good result does not only come from a good plan, but most of all, from a good team.
The President's plan for upgrading existing infrastructure and creating new projects have so far failed to materialize. And he continues to face widespread criticism after failing for weeks to douse fires from slash-and-burn farming. These have created hazardous smoke over neighboring Malaysia and Singapore. He was welcomed as the hero of the poor. Now 1 year later, the hero has fallen from his pedestal. While President Joko Widodo is struggling to manage expectations, his biggest challenge is to be seen as someone taking charge. The government hopes that economic stimulus packages will not only help the ailing economy, but also the president's approval ratings.
I think this is the periods of managing expectations and the limits of the government. And that so far, I think he has done it quite well. Because in a way, the expectations begin to become more realistic. But at the same time, we do see the beginning of new focus on areas that have been neglected in the past, especially on the infrastructure area.
And President Widodo continues to be praised for his health and education programs for the poor, and also popular at home, a contentious commitment to executing foreign drug traffickers, though this policy has been widely criticized abroad. Joko Widodo has 4 years left in office. He must hope the remaining time will be better as the first year.
Right, so let's get more now on the Indonesian president's first year in power. We're going to go to Singapore and speak to Rajiv Biswas, Chief Economist for Asia Pacific at IHS. Rajiv, nice to see you again. I wonder if Joko Widodo aimed too high. I mean, he obviously had to come in with some strong ideas to start off with, but maybe he pushed it a little bit too far.
I think he came with the right agenda, but the problem that he has faced are twofold. Firstly, politically, he doesn't have control of parliament and is not even the true leader of his own PDIP party. And the second is that the headwinds that Indonesia is facing due to the global economic environment have added to his problems, particularly because of the decline in commodity prices for key Indonesian exports such as thermal coal and liquefied natural gas. So trying to deal with that slowing momentum of the Indonesian economy when he doesn't really have the ability to push through reforms within his own parliament has made it a very difficult uphill struggle for him. So I think he has the right ambitions, but I think he hasn't been able to deliver, and it's not entirely his own fault. But if you compare, for example, India's Prime Minister Modi, who's a true CEO-style leader, has control in the lower house of Indian Parliament, and has been extremely charismatic on the global stage, we haven't really seen that similar kind of performance from Jokowi so far.
So, do you think he needs to step it up now? And has there been enough signs in the, latter months of that first year to show that he is stepping it up and that he gets what he needs to do?
I think in the last couple of months, we are seeing more efforts by Jokowi to push forward with liberalization. One of the problems that Indonesia has is that Parliament is generally somewhat protectionist in their thinking, and we've seen some evidence of this even during the latter years of the previous president's period in office, with some tighter, more protectionist rules in the mining sector in particular that, for example, require Indonesian control over mining ownership, and also more processing of mineral ores within Indonesia, which have been not well received by the global mining industry. So I think with that kind of stance, it's very difficult to move forward. But we have seen that Indonesia still remains attractive for foreign investment. Last year, foreign investment into Indonesia rose by about 13.5%. So I think there is the expectation from global multinationals that the consumer market of Indonesia, with 250 million people, is still a very attractive market for them to invest into. I think the great weakness of Indonesia is human capital hasn't really been sufficiently developed to attract higher value-adding industries, and we haven't really seen manufacturing export industries developing in Indonesia. They're too dependent on commodity
Can I jump in,
exports.
Rajiv? What do you mean about human capital? Tell us more about what you're saying there.
I think what we've seen since independence in Indonesia is that the investment in the development of vocational training and even tertiary education in Indonesia has really lagged very far behind countries such as China, South Korea, and India, which are now benefiting from their strong human capital in areas such as information technology and other areas of manufacturing technology skills. And that's because they did invest very heavily for decades in their educational system. Indonesia has recognized that its educational system is lagging behind its Asian competitors, but that's happened relatively recently, and it's only in the last 5 years or so that we've seen significant new efforts to improve that. President Jokowi is trying to move forward with this. One of the agenda items in his upcoming trip to the US will be to go to Silicon Valley to try to get US technology firms to come to Indonesia and work with Indonesian universities to ramp up technology training in Indonesia, and also, of course, to, he hopes, do more operations in Indonesia as well.
Trans-Pacific Partnership. Now, I know that's not signed yet, and I know Indonesia's not part of it, but it seems that Joko Widodo does want Indonesia to be part of it. I mean, that would surely be a big step to help it on the international stage.
I think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP as it's known, is very much a potential option for Indonesia, particularly now that there is an agreement in principle on the TPP, and if it is ratified by the governments, which in the case of the US remains still a big if, but if that does go ahead, I think it then puts more pressure on the Asian countries that are not in the TPP to reevaluate the benefits they would get by becoming part of the TPP process. And certainly in Indonesia, this has been an issue under discussion, and President Jokowi has signaled that in his meeting with President Obama in the US, TPP will be one of the topics that he'll discuss. I would expect that if Indonesia does want to move ahead on TPP, they'll probably wait till it's actually ratified before putting too much energy into the negotiation process. And even then, I think it would be quite a protracted process because TPP requires quite a lot of liberalization measures, not only for goods, trade, but in many areas such as intellectual property, state-owned enterprise competition, and other similar areas where Indonesia, certainly at the moment, isn't very much ready to take on those kind of commitments.
But what
So it
can,
would require considerable liberalization in a country that's...
Sorry, what can Indonesia offer the world? It might just be worth reminding our viewers of what, if it gets into that sort of trading area, what it can offer apart from, say, natural resources. What else has Indonesia got?
I think the long-term competitive advantage for Indonesia will be more and more in the area of manufacturing. That's what's going to generate the jobs growth. They do have a very large supply of labor, and the labor costs are still relatively low in Indonesia. But they haven't so far been able to become a manufacturing export hub in the way that Vietnam has, or that other countries such as China or South Korea have in the past. So I think that's an area of considerable opportunity. But to seize that opportunity, they need to make reforms. They need better infrastructure for ports, electricity, roads, and also they need to reform their labor laws. And basically, liberalization is very important. So TPP may be one avenue they can pursue to try to move ahead with some of the liberalization needed to become a competitive manufacturing export hub and reduce their reliance on commodity exports.